Good afternoon. Welcome to this week's AI Would Agree, everyone. I hope all the parents out there are on a fantastic half-term holiday. Had a good 3 days off and now back into Thursday and Friday, trying to do 5 days worth of work in 2 days. It's fun and run with a little man running about downstairs, screaming and shouting, doing Minions impressions, which is always good fun. Not that that's a segue into today's conversation at all, but whilst I'm on, welcome to the show, Anthony. Good to have you along. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you, mate. It's good to be on. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. As I start the show with pretty much everybody who comes along, you're currently working as director of CX at Ipsos Mori. How did you end up getting involved in contact centers in the first place, Anthony?
Oh well, I think it's the age-old story that gets told time and time again. It wasn't supposed to be this way. My background's actually all sports and coaching. I used to second dan karate. I used to coach like the kids there. I did tennis at a high level and used to coach kids there. So my background was all sport and coaching, and then I completely wrecked my knee at the end of college before going into uni, and basically meant that I needed to go and find something to do for a year whilst I'm waiting for my knee to heal up and my Achilles to heal up, so I could go off and obviously go and do the club. So I ended up doing what was NTL at the time, just on the phones. And it kind of snowballed from there. I stayed there for 17 years. So that was my entryway into contact center. It was surely a complete accident. I was only supposed to be a 6-month thing, and it ended up being 17 years at Virgin, and then kind of like this past year doing some stuff with Ipsos, working with some interesting brands across the globe. So I feel like that's the story that pretty much everyone says.
Injury.
Yeah, it's always the same story. It wasn't supposed to be this way. I wasn't supposed to be doing this. Kind of fell into it. It was all sports management. I completely wrecked my knee, and then I wrecked my Achilles, and that was game over from then on. And 17 years.
So it'd be interesting to know then. Like, obviously, you come from a coaching and sports background. Do you think that's been a benefit, and it's been a bit of a gift, a bit of a different direction that you've been able to take your career in as a result of that?
Absolutely. I think, just even like being able to kind of, stand up and speak to people and understand that people have different ways of learning or, interpreting the message that you're trying to send to them. Some people it's very much a carrot and a stick. With some people it's very much you need to lead them, and it's it's almost like you lead by example. But I've always said one of the best things that ever happened to me was I started on the phones in my career. So it gives you a level of authenticity when you kind of move up the ranks and you get into a position when you're in a much more senior position. I was able to have a level of authenticity because I've done that job. I've done that job in exactly the same way, and a lot of our frontline agents do it today. And in fact, I would argue it's a lot harder now than it ever was when I was on the phone, because there's so much more that's expected of them. You have all this improvement in technology and analysis and data science and all this stuff. And it just means that there's more expected of those guys on the front line. It's, back in my day on the phone, we were first line everything, but you kind of had the autonomy to go off and do what you needed to do to fix the customer's issue. And it wasn't about selling on every single call or whatever it may be. So I actually think that grounding of coaching, and particularly coaching like young kids and stuff like that, definitely set me up in my later career, whether that's managing teams or managing more virtually, or just being able to kind of, stand up and speak with a level of authority that actually really, really helped. But yeah, being on the phones as well, huge for all, it's huge for me in terms of being authentic and being able to speak to all the different levels. So, right the way down from the guys on the front line through to the more senior managers.
It's interesting. I think when we talk about leaderships and leadership styles, everybody envisages you're either a leader or you're not. And I tend to disagree with that vision, because I think there's lots of different roles underneath the leaders. I think there's lots of different types of leaders as well. Not just in terms of their style of leadership, but in terms of what their overarching goal is. You've got some people who are very good at building teams and building a community and building that around them. There's other people who are very good at achieving targets or turning teams around and transforming what they're doing. So the team leaders who are kind of much better at innovating and thinking outside the box, and it's kind of bringing the best of all of those worlds together. What kind of box would you put yourself in, Anthony? There's a bit of a curveball for you. Where do you...
It's a bit of a curveball. So, I mean, I liken it to, I think there's managers and then there's leaders. I don't like to manage. I like to lead, whether that's leading by example or, my style's very sort of, and you've probably noticed this from the various conversations that we've had. It's very upfront. It's very, this is what's expected. This is what we're doing. It's just be real with people. Be a human first and foremost. It's, a lot of managers sometimes get into that whole state of, I'm trying to be something that other people, I think that other people expect me to be, as opposed to just being you, just being authentic and just being you. And as you say, leadership is an individual thing. You've got, I've had some managers and leaders that, are silent. They're not rah-rah people. They're not going to, stand up and, do all the daft things that we do in contact centers where we're, dressing up in funny costumes and all that type of stuff. But they lead by example. They manage upwards as well. And, you see that and you respect that. And yeah, people have different styles. And that's what makes the contact center having such a fascinating place, is there are so many different individualistic styles that what's kind of been going on over the last 5-6 years, where actually they're trying to a certain extent, drill a lot of that out of people. And you're almost kind of creating robots to a certain extent is the wrong approach. I think it's about, really, celebrating people's individuality. I think that's what comes through. And that when you're speaking to a customer, it's always about authenticity. They want someone that's authentic. They don't want someone just saying, oh, hello, Mr. Bradshaw, because there's a process that says you have to use someone's last name or whatever it is, or find out what their first name is. They just want someone to be authentic and have a conversation with them and sort the issue out.
So question then, it's something that our CEO is quite a big fan of, is scripting. And scripting is a very, very polarizing conversation one way or the other. I'm pretty much sat on the fence. I think it very much depends on how you land the scripting, if I'm honest, rather than the scripting itself. And one of his conversations is around how kind of everybody says that scripting takes away that agent empowerment, the authenticity and the originality. Certainly if you're going down to where you must kind of, not necessarily every single word, but the key words and kind of the general formation of it. And his point in the back of that was kind of Elvis Presley, sung the same lyrics over and over again. But nobody has ever said that Elvis Presley wasn't empowered or wasn't original or wasn't authentic. And I appreciate we're talking about two slightly different use cases, but essentially it's the same thing. So is that something that you've seen kind of done well somewhere, or is it kind of the case that every time you've seen scripting, it's just been put in place really badly and it hasn't really worked?
I have seen it done well in places. I've always been a big supporter of it. in one of the last places I worked, it was a dirty word. You weren't allowed to use the word scripting, so we started calling them structured frameworks. But I think there's a time and a place for it. If you think about conversations that you have, and you look at all of the the analytics and data science and how sophisticated some of that stuff is, you can pinpoint the points in the conversation that are going to generate interest from a customer, be that a repeat conversation or a follow-up call or a follow-up question or whatever it is. Why on earth wouldn't you want consistency at some of those points? So I'm not going to need to script the entire call, but certainly certain parts of the conversation, and I come from a telecoms background, billing conversations, massive. It's about 40 to 50% of your volume. And the bill not incorrect. That's the thing, is the bill's correct. It's the explanation of what to expect when you receive that bill, which is usually wrong because the customer's expectations differ from what they end up actually receiving. Yeah. And that's because there's, if you've got 4,000 agents, there's 4,000 different ways of explaining what your bill's going to look like. So why on earth wouldn't you put something in there that said, right, this is how we are universally going to explain a bill to a customer. And actually, it no longer becomes we'd like you to do this. It's, we expect you to do this. And it becomes more of a compliance type thing. So actually, we know if you don't do this, the customer's going to call back in 7 days, 14 days, 30 days, 45 days, whatever it is, they're going to call back. But actually, if you actually let them know what to expect, and then the key to that is then using technology to follow that up, to remind them to say, you're going to get your bill. It's going to look a little bit different, but remember your conversation with Paul when he told you that your bill was going to change because you're upgrading your account. There you go. That's, you reinforce that. But yeah, I mean, there's hundreds of those types of touch points across all the conversations that you have, not just in the telecoms world, but across different industries as well, where actually using that scripting or structured frameworks, as we got to calling them, I think it's an advantage than it is. I don't think it detracts from the conversation at all. I think if anything, it reinforces, and the customer then knows that the next time they upgrade, if they get the exact same conversation around that point, they build trust. We used to see a load of customers call us back, just basically because they wanted to check that what they were told was true, because they've heard that way of explanation 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different ways. So I think there's a time and a place for it. I don't think you need to script every part of the conversation. I think there's definitely certain parts of the conversation that should be scripted. If I go back to one of my old places of work, the best sounding conversations, believe it or not, were the SCA driven mobile calls. Where you had to reinforce around what to expect around the loan and all those other various bits and pieces. And they were by far the best sounding conversations, because the agents knew and the rest of the business knew that this wasn't you can just leave it out. It was this needed to be done. And actually, they understood that there was consequences if they didn't, because, the SCA wouldn't just come after the company, to come after you individually. So I think there's a time and place for it. I get frustrated when people, talk about scripts, and it's, they think about the old days where, entire conversations were scripted, particularly in the outsource space, and it's like robots. But, you think about it, it's no different than what, early chatbots and stuff have been doing. That's all scripted. And now you're starting to see the next generation of those, where it's all cognitive and it's much more conversational. But, everyone seems to be all right with chatbots that follow scripts.
Well, exactly. One of the things that I usually come to, and I talk to a lot of kind of team leaders as well, and they're usually the biggest anti-scripting leaders. It's the team leaders that are trying to look out for their agents' interests. And one of the conversations I always have with them is like, well, for each agent that you're talking to that's on your team, when they get the same query from a different customer, you listen to the more experienced ones, and they will rattle off their own script that they've made in their own head to deal with that exact situation. So they're already scripting. They're just scripting their way. They don't realize they're doing it. You don't realize they're doing it, but that's exactly what they're doing. And how do we build a chatbot? Well, we look at what the agents say. We build out the script from what the agents say, and then we feed it to the chatbot. So it's always an interesting conversation to see what people's general reactions are. And I know you're quite a data-oriented person, and you're quite keen on using technology where it's appropriate to kind of support the agents. So, like, where do you see like the contact center of the future? I guess is one of the conversations that I've seen bobbing about the forums at the moment. What's next for agents and technology together?
Well, I mean, I think there's where it's going and what I would like to see. So what I would like to see is, everyone to a certain extent, I think, particularly if you speak to frontline guys and girls and team managers, are petrified of AI, absolutely petrified, because they think it's going to replace them. And, companies haven't done a really good job of marketing AI. Because actually it shouldn't do. What it should do is augment the conversation and help that. So, you basically, what I would like to see is, we talk about chatbots that look external and conversational stuff that looks internal. We should be doing the same stuff internally. All the journey mapping that we do for customer experience, none of that gets done inward looking from an operational perspective. So I'd like to see a lot of those tools. If you think about your knowledge centers and your, SharePoints and various other bits and pieces that the agent needs to go to get answers, calculators here for, pro rata advance charges. What if you just had your own little personal assistant that you could type the query in and it'd go find the information for you? And it's constantly, it's listening to your conversations and actually gives you a bit of a helpful guide that says, look, actually, here you go, this customer could get this deal. Do you want me to apply it to them? So you can focus as an agent or in the contact center very much on having the conversation. You've got that technology there that then helps you remove a lot of that distraction. So that's what I would like to. I'd like to see a lot of that technology that gets used for customers to make their life easier. You use that internally and make the agent's life a lot easier. And it's not about, having, a ticker at the bottom of the screen that's saying you're losing a customer, you're losing a customer. It's about actually, just, pointing out, right, actually, yeah, this customer could be on this different deal. It'll save them, 30 quid a month or whatever it may be. And actually, you've got the data, the analysis is there for that. The strides that have been made in the data science world and stuff in terms of, I was always absolutely amazed by the stuff that the guys at Virgin used to do from a data science perspective and actually what they used to be able to uncover. But there's no real outlet to utilize it, certainly at an operational level. It's all kind of gets bottled up and it's always about the customer, and that's fine. But actually, you should be using those tools to make your agent's life a lot easier, allow them to focus on that key thing, which is a conversation. So AI and chatbots and all those bits and pieces, they shouldn't be there, and we should never be talking about replacing people with that. But automation, AI, chatbots should actually be almost become an extension of each individual agent. So it's almost like their own little personal Alexa or Siri or whatever it may be. And that's your interface into, your CRM systems and stuff like that. I was at a conference not too long ago, just seeing some of the strides that were being made around, note taking, which is a minefield from an agent perspective in terms of how much is too much information, how little is too little. You want enough information in there that the next person that can answer the call from the customer's perspective, has got enough history to then make a sound decision about what they need to do. Well, there's the technologies out there now that actually, they kind of listen to that in the background and summarizes that call and posts it for you. That, for me, is just another example of technologies that actually could be used to help the agent. And I think a lot of it is there. It's just being used externally, not internally. So that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see a much more focus on the operational teams and taking all this learning that we've done around the customer, journey mapping, et cetera, personas, and turning that inwards and actually doing the same thing from our operational perspectives to help really kind of like drive that experience. Because it could, people go and they do these jobs and they don't see a step process as a career. Yeah. They see it as all right, well, it's bottom of the rung or whatever it is. But actually, there should be a step process in there. It should be a perfectly valid career for someone to do that enjoys having conversations with customers. That shouldn't mean that they're stuck on X salary for the rest of the time. They actually should, based on their skill set, be able to make a viable career out of it. And I think that's where technology can help, because it can start to, it can start to differentiate some of that as well, I think.
I feel like you've just sat and described a lot of our toolkit to everyone. So
that's not by design.
I haven't slipped him a tenner. It's just that was this is how we ended up talking on LinkedIn, is because we realised that actually our paths crossed on quite a lot of different things. We saw a lot of things eye to eye. So it's interesting that they're where you see it going. And yeah, look, I see a lot of people talk about real-time conversation analytics, prompts, especially speech analytics, and you're talking too fast on an agent screen, being okay, well, I'll talk like this to tick my box. It's not helping the customer, it's not helping the agent. Or to your point, sentiment analysis, or you're going to lose the customer. Well, all that's doing is it's heaping pressure onto your poor agent who's now feeling like they've got to pull something out the bag. When actually they should have just had the confidence to deal with the conversation in the first place, and let's look at why they felt unprepared or they were failing to help the customer.
And again, there's a place for real time, right? Around, true big compliance things, issues, DPA, whatever it may be. I get that. But again, this whole idea that people want real time, I always have the exact same conversation with people is, well, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
How does it affect the actual conversation there and then?
I think for me, one of the things that will be solved by speech analytics is a real-time solve of the customer vulnerability identification. Being able to look at metrics and characteristics of the conversation that would indicate a vulnerable customer, other than what they're actually saying to you. It's fair enough if somebody says they're in a wheelchair, or they broke a leg, or they've lost their job, or can't afford school uniform to an extent. But what happens when they're repeating themselves over and over, or they're just saying yes to every question that they're asked if it's a closed question, or they struggle to answer it if it's an open-ended question? Those sorts of indicators, that's where kind of machine learning and real-time speech analytics is going to really come into its own, especially with the changes to consumer duty and things coming. So it's exciting to see that starting to take shape. I think it's clear that augmented agents are definitely the way forward. And I think even, when we talk real-time analytics, it's not about the fact that real-time analytics aren't the future. It's how they're used and how they support the agent, as opposed to trying to control the agent or the conversation in real time. I don't think that's the place for it, but certainly, if you've got a consistent approach for agents when they know what the outcomes are that they're trying to achieve, and you've given them the toolkit ahead of time with skills and training to be able to achieve them, then it's useful to then, to your point, kind of take a lot of the burden off their shoulders to let them get on with the human interaction. Because ultimately, as AI comes along, everybody's jobs are at risk to a certain extent from things like AI and machine learning. But the way to kind of circumvent that is to go back towards how am I the best human interactor that is available to this business? Because if you're just clicking boxes and typing the same thing in over and over again, then yeah, you will probably at some point get replaced. Even my job isn't above that, right? But if you can relate to people, empathize with them, and be the best human solution that they've got, then that's where you need to be. And technology gets people there. And I think you've kind of seen that a lot around things like NPS and, you know, understanding what customers feel about the business that they're working with, right?
Yeah, I mean, NPS, anyone that knows anything about analytics and stats will tell you that NPS is a deeply flawed metric. But the most important thing that comes out of the back of NPS is you get feedback from your customers. That is the most important piece of information that you could get. And I always have this argument with people around how much we spend on something like NPS. You know, you've got entire teams that are dedicated to analyzing NPS, and you know, you've got all the infrastructure that sits around it, and that's fine. But you know, you get however many 100 or 1,000 complaints from customers every single day, every single week, particularly in, you know, business where you're actually, you know, giving someone a service, but no one goes off and reads that. No, and that's unsolicited. That, in theory, is even much more valuable because there's no incentive for the customer to give you that feedback. But yeah, NPS, I get it. I get it as a metric in terms of, you know, particularly at an overarching relationship level. Makes a load of sense. It's a nice, simple, easy metric that people can kind of, you know, revolve around. It's either, you know, plus is good, minus is negative. That's fine. But it doesn't work operationally for me. There's never enough volume that goes through it. It's not the right metric for it. But ultimately, it's the feedback you get from customers that is the gold dust, and being able to mine that is the key. And, you know, again, those tools have become a lot more sophisticated now. You know, I think most businesses probably have text analytics or a variation of text analytics nowadays, because it's just become almost like your basic toolkit is, you know, you need something in there that allows you to kind of analyze that feedback. It's hugely important. But yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with speech analytics. It's, you know, speech analytics for a very long time, and you'll know this because, you know, you've lived this as well, is, you know, it was a branding exercise that just went wrong for a very, very long time with speech analytics. It was always sold as, this will replace your analysts. You don't need any analysts, just do speech analytics. Yeah, but what about all the people you need to build all the categories and stuff? Because it comes empty. There's nothing in it when it actually turn it on. You've got to build all that stuff in. So, you know, it's good to see that that's starting to change now. A lot of companies are a lot more forthright with a lot of the work that goes into, you know, your speech analytics and your text analytics. But yeah, in terms of NPS, it can be, you know, the most powerful part of NPS is the feedback the customer gives you. And that's key. And it's about how you put those closed loop feedback mechanisms in place at that kind of broader level, to then actually drive that improvement back in. That's the way you need to use it, is get that feedback, you know, categorize that feedback so you kind of create those pots, but you've got to have that closed loop process over the back of it. So your business improvement team, your service transformation teams, whatever you want to call them, have got that constant hopper of information. And actually, you know, you're not about fixing one agent at that point. You're fixing entire buckets of conversations, because ultimately you'll come back down to, you know, expectation setting will probably be one of the biggest things, or, you know, there's a perceived issue with, you know, a fault or whatever it may be. And it's about how you utilize that information and drive those closed loop feedbacks. And that's the thing that tends to be missing from a lot of the of those kind of like customer experience programs. And it's not just MPS, it's voice of the customer and all that type of stuff as well. Forget about the score. Look at the feedback. That's the most important part.
And I think it's about kind of about recognizing that you need to get feedback from across your customer spectrum, and not every customer wants to fill out a survey or a feedback or drop you an email to let you know how they thought you were doing. They just kind of want to have their interaction and want to go away. And that's where I see a lot of the value in conversation analytics, is closing that gap to as close to 100% of your customers having given feedback, whether they appreciate it or not, is kind of in 80% of your conversations where your customers haven't left a CSAT score. They haven't replied to your NPS indicator. Then you've still got some feedback from them that is from their mouth, that is relevant to the query that they were dealing with. And I think that is a beautiful gift to be able to give to team leaders and to organizations, to be able to say, right now, you've got your PS and your CSAT and your ESAT and your customer effort measures and your CX scores and all the rest of the jazz. But now we can close the loop and go, here's the data that you were missing. Now bring it all together and tell me what you can get back.
And the good thing about it is, number one, it's unbiased. So it rates and judges every conversation in the same way. Well, the other part of it is you get an equal amount of positive as well. And, we tend to manage or coach from a negative standpoint. It's always about how do you improve, or you're not as good as this person, or, what do we need to do to improve you on this metric or whatever it may be. But actually with the conversational analytics, because as you say, it looks at every conversation, but also those little bits and parts of the conversation, parsing it up into those different parts, is you can actually get to a point now where you can say, right, well, actually, here's some of the stuff that you need to work on that didn't quite go well. But actually, here's some stuff that you did on that conversation that was brilliant. Well done. I'll praise you for that. Let's just put something in place for these. And that's what it gives you. It allows you to kind of see both sides of it. So it's not just negative reinforcement all the time. You have that positive angle as well. And I think that's really important from a moving from this idea of managing to leading, is on leading, you've got to be able to present positive side as well. It can't just be carrot and stick and, beating people over the head with, you need to get better, you need to get better, you need to get better. It's actually, what are you doing really, really good, which you should actually continue to do, or even, use as motivation to drive that forward. It's always negative, whereas the conversation analytics allows you to kind of see both sides. And actually, I think one of the interesting parts for conversational analytics is get to see the stuff that is neutral. There's kind of like, almost like stuff that you would kind of pass over and go, all right, that's all right. It's not brilliant, but it's not terrible. Well, that's the stuff that you need to turn into brilliant if you want to then start driving that experience forward. And it really helps. That's one of the things in MPS that's always frustrating, is your passive customers, which typically score you between a 7 and 8, and effectively gets ignored from a calculation perspective. That's probably your biggest opportunity.
Yeah. If you shift everything to the left 5%, then you're winning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's
that 100% are obviously.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to have to draw an end to the show. We've run slightly over time, but it's been really great catching up with you, Anthony. Thanks very much for your time today. And hopefully I'll catch you in the LinkedIn groups again in the not too distant. I'm
sure you will. I'll keep quiet for that long.
Fantastic. Been a really good chat today. Guys who's watching the show at home, obviously the video will stay live. So if you want to watch it again, you can watch it again on LinkedIn. We'll be popping it up on the YouTube channel soon. And big announcement to be made. It's not the biggest announcement I've got, but we will be at the Colin Contact Center Expo coming up in November. So hopefully I'll see a lot of my regular viewers, guests, and everybody else there as well. I'm really looking forward to getting out in the physical world far too long. But it's been a great show. Thanks for coming along, Anthony. Great. Hopefully everybody's enjoyed the conversation. And I will see you all again next Thursday at 3 p.m. Take care. Bye-bye.